Notre Dame to the Big Ten. It sounds good in theory, not as much in reality.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We will check in on Ohio State because they don't necessarily know who their quarterback is. We'll check in on Oklahoma, who just landed one of the biggest players out of the transfer portal. We'll start today with Notre Dame. So, my Locked On counterpart, who has been on the show as recently as yesterday, Craig Sheeman of Locked On Big Ten, was recently talking about the prospect of Notre Dame going into the Big Ten and being forced to go there. And his argument, for those of you who didn't see or hear it, goes something like this. Revenue sharing is going to come to college football. And it's going to cost schools about $30 million a year, $300 million over 10 years. That's the reporting. Those are the indications from Ross Dellinger, who has been doing yeoman's work, reporting these stories ranging from realignment to player compensation, everything of the sort. And yes, major college athletics are worth a lot of money, even more money now than they ever have been before. You've got more money flowing in from donors, more money from television rights, ticket sales are higher, everything is up and continuing to go up. And the players getting a piece of that is going to hold up in court. That's just going to be a reality. But even for major athletic programs like a Notre Dame or Ohio State or Texas or LSU, Alabama, whoever you want to talk about in there, $30 million a year, that's not chump change. Even if you're Texas A&M, it took a lot to pony up $75 million to pay Jimbo Fisher to not coach Texas A&M football, but that's a coaching decision. This is something that might very well be taking place one day. It has not been set in stone, but these are the reports to pay the players and cut them into the revenue sharing model. So if it's $30 million a year, Notre Dame is going to be making $50 million from NBC on its new media rights deal and $17 million from its affiliate membership in the ACC for all other sports. And so Craig's argument, a logical one, but I don't agree, is that Notre Dame is going to have to join the Big Ten, because if you're a Big Ten school, and Notre Dame would not be like Oregon and Washington where they'd be a partial share earner of the media rights money. They would jump right into the $80-90 million range. They would be one of those higher end teams, and that would make up for the tens of millions of dollars that they would otherwise have to cut into their current operating budget to pay the players in the revenue sharing model if that becomes a required part of participating in college athletics. But there are two obstacles here. Number one, Notre Dame has a ridiculously stubborn desire to not join a conference. And you can argue that's factor number two. I think it's factor number one. I think they are going to continue to do everything they can to be unique, to be special. And look, it's not like $50 million is chump change. And with the 17 from the ACC, you're talking $67 million in there. Well, that's a lot more than anybody in the ACC is making who would have to pay $30 million over per year for about a decade or so. And Oregon and Washington are only going to get 30 to 32 for several years as they go into the Big Ten. And the Big 12 is getting in the low 30s. It's still more, but is it as much as the SEC or the Big Ten? No, and that's where the argument is. But here's the second hurdle. There is a contractual obligation between Notre Dame and the ACC that is twofold to provide obstacles to the Irish being a team that could make their way into the Big Ten, even if they want to. That contract says that through 2035, I believe is the year, or 30, it goes into the 2030s, I know that. They not only play 5 ACC members a year in football, and if you go to the Big Ten, you can't do that anymore because you have to play 9 Big Ten teams, which leaves you 3 non-conference spots. And what would happen to their traditional rivalries with USC? That would become a conference game. What about with Stanford? Would they keep that going? I don't know. That'd be a Notre Dame decision. But they also are prohibited from joining a conference in that time period as long as that arrangement exists for football. So let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that Notre Dame wants to go to the Big Ten because they want to help, close the revenue gap, or they want to offset the increased costs of having a revenue sharing model. If that happens, they would have to get out of this arrangement with the ACC. And what is the ACC doing right now? Let me think about this for a couple seconds. Oh, that's right. They're trying to stop Clemson and Florida State from leaving. And if Florida State and Clemson leave, are they going to do so for free? Absolutely, positively not. So Notre Dame, whose affiliation but not membership with the ACC in football certainly is a benefit to Jim Phillips' league and the television numbers that they produce on an annual basis, you're not going to just let them walk away and not charge them anything. So you may pick up a couple tens of millions of dollars going to the Big Ten if you're Notre Dame. But you are then going to have to compensate the ACC because you're backing out of that arrangement. You can't play 5 teams every year. The most you could play is 3. Now, maybe there'd be a reduced cost, but that's where this calculation gets tricky for Notre Dame. And they continue to be the most fascinating realignment chess piece because they're such an unknown. Would they be able to get out of that? How much would it cost them? Would it be worth it? And then you'd have to ask yourself, if going to the Big Ten and paying the ACC to get out of that particular arrangement is worth it financially or is not worth it financially, how much of a loss are you willing to take to just be included in the Big Ten? How badly do you want to be there? And that's why I laid out factor number 1 when it comes to Notre Dame remaining a football independent as being the Irish's persistent stubbornness to having any sort of official conference affiliation and having their own deal with NBC and playing at the television time that they want, not being beholden to other teams and time zones and conferences and everything like that. That's why it's so essential. And I think that, look, can I see a world unfolding in which Notre Dame one day winds up in the Big Ten? Sure, I could. But does it feel like that is urgent? Does it feel like they are on the precipice of suddenly just changing their viewpoint and breaking and saying, fine, you know what, we give up, we'll join the Big Ten? It'd be music to the Big Ten's ears because then they could go get Florida State and Clemson once they get out of the ACC for however much money that costs. And then North Carolina could follow suit, and then you'd pair Notre Dame with North Carolina, and you have an 8-team addition offseason for the Big Ten. That could happen. Now, it wouldn't go into place for 2024, but still, that'd be a big-time move. And Notre Dame is coveted by any league worth its salt. The Big Ten certainly would take him. The question is, can you change their minds? And I don't think that answer is true. And with the ACC component in there as well, I'd be surprised if we see them on the move anytime soon. Drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at SMcLaughlinCFB. I have thoughts about Ohio State. I have questions about Ohio State. Let's answer some of them, shall we? Before we get to the Buckeyes, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Everything you could possibly want to bet on for college football right now is available. You can even bet on individual games. Those are available over at FanDuel. National title odds, conference title odds, win totals, everything is there. Tons of great stuff, so go check them out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Still a lot of questions out in Columbus. Jay Stevens at Locked On Buckeyes here to help us try and answer some. Jay, the biggest question out there is the quarterback position. Do you have an inkling of where Ohio State is leaning for who starts for Ryan Day and Chip Kelly this fall?
I know the three guys that are at the top of that competition right now. Spencer, I'm glad to be back on the show with you. The three guys in the mix right now, Will Howard, the former Kansas State quarterback, Devin Brown, I believe it's his third year in Columbus, and Julian Sayin, first time in college football. He's a true freshman who was in the mix, as Ryan Day described it during a presser at the end of spring practice. It's weird, man. We're in another offseason where we're talking about a quarterback competition at Ohio State, and no one has a good handle on where the thing currently stands. We know where it stands. I still think Will Howard is probably going to be the guy that's going to win the job. I'm not sold that he is a major upgrade over Kyle McCord, but that's where we are right now. I don't know what to think about Devin Brown. He has a dream about being an Ohio State starting quarterback. He has done nothing to show me that he is going to be a starting quarterback in the upcoming season. And Julian Sands just has a cup of coffee, has 15 practices under his belt in college at Ohio State. So that's not a big enough sample size for me to say a true freshman is going to start. So my thought, Will Howard, Ryan Day probably will not announce a starting quarterback until the middle of fall camp.
And it's strange to me that we're in this position for the Buckeyes, because I had in my mind penciled in Will Howard. I like Will Howard, and I think that he can have the best season of his career at Ohio State. He's got great offensive coaches. He's going to have a good offensive line. He's going to have a great running back tandem behind him, which is where he had his best year when Deuce Vaughn was with him in the backfield at Kansas State. He's going to have a good receiving core as well. But you have three very different options here. You've got the veteran, you've got the sort of experience, timeline could line up for him to, make it his moment, it's his time. That's Devin Brown. And then you have we don't know. I mean, you see a guy at practice every now and then, you see him in the spring game, but you don't know what Julian's saying is as a college quarterback. And so does it concern you that Ohio State could not right now line up and know who would need to be behind center?
No, because I think if the game was playing right now, I think they would start Will Howard. It's the long process that Ryan Day wants to go through to make sure Will Howard is the guy. I think it's a situation where possibly internally they've already announced a starting quarterback. Kind of similar to what I thought last year was that McCord, this was never anything that came out in the public or no sources said anything. It's just me in my head. I thought last year internally they already said who the starting quarterback was going to be, but they prolonged it into the regular season for whatever reason. Ryan Day wanted to do that. Something tells me internally right now, Will Howard's the guy, and they're just going through this process just to do it. I don't understand it. I would be concerned if it is a true freshman, and I would be concerned if it was Devin Brown, just being honest with you. Devin Brown, he got hurt 3 times in less than 12 months last year. He hasn't really done anything to wow me with his arms or his legs and say, oh, he is that guy. He's a college quarterback. Like, he'll start at some point, maybe at Ohio State, maybe not, but I have not seen enough to wow me. And Julian Sands just a kid. I mean, he's young and inexperienced, just got to school. So if it's one of those two guys, I would be concerned. If it's Will Howard, I would not be, especially with Emeka Egbuka healthy, the two good running backs in the backfield. And if Jeremiah Smith is that dude like everybody believes he will be, Will Howard will be fine.
That is a dude. You talk about new wide receiver names to know in college football this year. Cam Coleman at Auburn, Ryan Williams at Alabama, and frankly, I think Jeremiah Smith as well at Ohio State. It feels like he's going to be one of those top guys that really bursts onto the scene for the Buckeyes offense this year. But far be it from me to overlook or try to brush under the rug predictions I have made that don't come to pass. But we have that situation here, and that's that all 5 Ohio State quarterbacks are still on the roster, and the window to enter the transfer portal has closed. Players can still come out of the portal. There are a lot of talented guys still available in the transfer portal, impact players for teams to get in 2024. But you got 5 guys in that room, Jay, and I thought all spring one of these guys is going to move, and we saw quarterback movement, but it wasn't out of Ohio State. What does that say about the players that Ryan Day's got at his disposal?
They're all ready to compete. And I think it's what Ryan Day and the other coaches want right now is guys that want to compete, guys that want to be there, and guys that will grind every single day. But also, I realize, and I've been very vocal about naming players that I think should enter the portal. And it's not that I think they're bad. I just think for their own personal timeline and own personal progression, as far as when they will get on the field or when they could get on the field, they may get on the field sooner at a different school rather than if they stayed at Ohio State. I'm cool with all 5 guys staying. I would be cool if 1 or 2 of them left. Like, I would be perfectly fine with that. But if you're all there, you got to compete. And if you at some point during this upcoming offseason or in the season get tired of competing and you realize that you made the wrong decision, okay, cool. Hop in the portal in December. I don't care. I truly don't care at all. But it does show that there's a good culture in there. They understand what's going on, and they're cool competing, which is great. I do think it was kind of dumb, and I don't use that word all the time, Spencer. I think it was kind of dumb when people were saying, oh, Aaron Noland, he is a true freshman. Why is he not in the quarterback battle right now? Homie just got on campus. The only reason Julian Sands actually in the battle is because he has something different than the other quarterbacks that are older than him has with the way he throws the ball. And the other guys really haven't separated themselves. And he's just different than Aaron Noland. Not saying Aaron Noland is bad, but Ohio State people are saying, oh, why is Aaron Noland not in the battle right now? Homie just got here. Julian Sands just got here, and he's not supposed to be in that QB competition, but he's just that good. Aaron Noland just getting to Ohio State, not transferring, great for him. I look forward to Aaron Noland being a quarterback at Ohio State, Julian Sands one day. I don't know if Devin Brown will ever start for the Buckeyes, and I'll leave it at that.
So Ohio State has had a great transfer portal offseason, top 10 in class, no action in the spring cycle. But between that, no players coming in from the April 16th to April 30th window there. I mean, they could, there was a report going around that Jacoby Matthews, who's probably the top-ranked safety in the transfer portal right now, could be going to Ohio State. We'll see if that move gets made. But with all that and the quarterback question circling around Ryan Day's program right now, what would you say is the overall vibe or mood amongst Ohio State fans? Is not knowing a starter dragging down the feeling of, hey, this is a national championship level roster, which it absolutely is?
No, it's really not, Spencer. The vibe right now is still natty or bust by a lot of fans out there. I don't like using that terminology myself to describe my accusation.
That is a high bar.
When Denzel Burke is in a presser during the beginning of spring practice talking about, hey, natty or bust, and he is a guy that could have gone to the NFL draft in 2024, could have been at worst an early portion of the second-round pick, could have been a first-round pick. But if he says that and the other guys on defense are saying the same thing, I would follow their lead as far as expectations. But, I mean, the vibe really is not only the quarterback right now. They're trusting Ryan Day that they can put the right guy in at quarterback, but also trusting that the Buckeyes defense is just going to be different this year. So much different, so much better than almost every other team in the country. Can't say every team. There's still that team down in Athens that I have mad respect for, that I still believe is the best team in the country. Buckeye fans may hate me for that, but I don't care. I want to give it to you the way that I view it right now. I still think Georgia and Ohio State, if they lined up today, if they lined up in August, if they lined up in December, I still think right now Georgia is the better football team. And Ohio State can change that, my mindset with that, based on how they play in the season. But Spencer, I still think the vibe right now is natty or bust by a lot of guys, but it's still the vibe is Ohio State has a good enough roster to beat Michigan. That's the vibe. Ohio State has a good enough roster to compete and to win the Big Ten championship for the first time since 2020. That is a belief by a lot of fans. And the belief is Buckeye fans believe the Buckeyes will make noise in the CFP in the fall. Reality is they got to get the quarterback right and the offensive line. If one of those two things is not right and it's a bad person or a group of five for the O-line that's really bad and poor and things just go really off the rails, the Buckeyes might lose to Michigan again. That's just reality. They might lose and not even play in the Big Ten Conference Championship game. It had to be really bad. I'm not saying Michigan's going to be
I'd pick Ohio State. Like, even with the quarterback questions, Michigan doesn't know who their starting quarterback is either. And right now, am I taking Ohio State's roster or Michigan's? I'm going with Ohio State's, but if Ohio State goes 11-2, loses the Big Ten title game, gets to the playoff, wins a game, loses in the second round, I can't wait to have the hot seat conversation with you, Jay. We're just going to heat it up right underneath Ryan Day. Perhaps we will not do that because we try to be rational. But Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes, great stuff. As always, you check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Jay.
Really appreciated it. I enjoyed it. Got to do it again.
Absolutely. Oklahoma just landed a massive name out of the transfer portal. What sort of impact does Damonic Williams make for the Sooners defense? That's coming up next. We will check in with the Sooners over in Norman, but all right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in the game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the board with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go always feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine, and there's always new timed events that help you win big like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. So there's always something fun to discover. That's why you should check out Monopoly Go. Get off the bench. Go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Oklahoma might have just landed their biggest transfer of the offseason. John Williams, the Locked On Sooners host, not the composer, joining me here on the show. And John, Damonic Williams is a huge, literally and metaphorically, addition for this Oklahoma defense. LSU was after him. A bevy of other schools were trying to get him. What was your reaction when Williams ended up picking Oklahoma?
It was incredible. I mean, it was one of those recruitments that had a ton of profile to it. He was being recruited by Texas heavily, LSU, as you mentioned, and Missouri, three schools that Oklahoma will contend with as they go into the SEC for recruits, both regionally and nationally. And Oklahoma had kind of taken a couple, shots across the bow from Missouri over the last year with, Williams Nwaneri choosing the Tigers and then Caden Green leaving Oklahoma in the transfer portal for Missouri. So this was a big win for the Sooners, for Brent Venables, for Todd Bates, especially over Texas, who just had two guys go in the top 40 of the NFL draft, two really high profile defensive tackles, and Oklahoma needed this one. I mean, they had a guy in Dejon Terry who played 300, 400 snaps for him last year, but he was the only guy coming back that had played significant snaps at defensive tackle for them going into 2024. You like the young depth that you have, but it's just not been proven. It's not experienced. And you didn't really want to go into your first SEC season relying on true freshmen to be impactful players. Now, they can be. They've got the talent to be, but I don't think you felt great about that proposition. So landing Damonic Williams just totally reshapes what you have up front at defensive tackle in particular, because he's a guy that can play nose tackle. He can play a little three tech. He's been productive in 2 years at TCU. He's played a ton of snaps. I mean, he started every single game for the Horned Frogs, including that run to the national title game back in 2022. So this is a dude with a lot of experience. He's going to be able to be impactful in the run game. He has a little bit as a pass rusher, and he's improved statistically, from 2022 to 2023, despite playing fewer games in 2023 for the Horned Frogs. So really, really excited about that, because it just allows them to be a little bit more dynamic up front, which is what they need to be. They have been okay in Brent Venables' first couple of years, but this is just going to help everybody out on the defense, including that really, really good and talented linebacker core. Like a guy like Danny Stutzman is going to love playing behind a guy like Damonic Williams, who's just going to eat up so much space and give Stutzman an opportunity to run free.
I think this is what a typical high-profile transfer looks like in college football nowadays as it pertains to where a guy slots in on the roster, because you look at what Colorado has done the last couple of years. They're building almost their entire team just on a pure numbers basis through the transfer portal. And we don't know if that's going to work. It's too early to say. They improved from year one, or from 2022 to 2023. We'll see if they make a jump, as I expect them to again in year two. But Williams comes into Oklahoma where, he's the headline guy, right? He's the transfer who, as you said, has got the proven element to his game. Multi-year starter, impact player. You know exactly what you're going to be able to get from him on that defensive line. And then you have the young talent behind him who maybe could start in a pinch, but this is this sort of move I think you make when you're Oklahoma in that spot, when you're trying to say, okay, we're not building for next year. We're trying to make a splash, to make an impact right here, right now. Because if it was all about, going with maybe even Jackson Arnold's timeline of development, you'd say, well, maybe we don't pony up the extra NIL dollars to get, and I have no idea what the NIL situation is here. I'm just speaking hypothetically, but maybe we don't put the extra effort out. Maybe we don't put, more NIL dollars into a move like this. But to me, getting a guy who is this high profile and who is coveted by numerous other blue blood, big time programs, to me, that sends a message from Brent Venables and company of we're not trying to just come in and keep our head above water in the SEC. We are trying to do more than that.
Exactly. I think it creates a bigger, or at least it reveals that they have a sense of urgency, that when you have a guy like Danny Stutzman returning for one more year, Billy Bowman returning for one more year, two guys that probably could have gone in the top 100 of the 2024 NFL draft, you want to take advantage of that. And you want to take advantage of the talent that you have, and bringing a Damonic Williams in just shows that, hey, they're ready to go win. They want to go win. They want to go be successful in year one in the SEC. They don't want to kind of bide their time and let Jackson Arnold kind of wade through that first year and then really load up for 2025. No, they think that they've got enough defensive pieces to take another step in that defensive progression, that they could potentially be a top 15, top 10 defense, and a signing like Damonic Williams that adds to it. In addition to a guy like Jermaine Lowell, who spent the last couple of years at Louisville, but previously was at Arizona State. I mean, this was a dude that had 10 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks as a sophomore a long time ago, back in 2019. Injuries kind of limited him over the last few years, but he was very, very productive early on and had himself on NFL draft radars early in his career. Now, if he can rediscover some of his production from early in his career, then he's got a chance to be an impactful player. So they're really trying to make sure that they don't have any obvious holes. And they've done that through the transfer portal. They've got young guys that are developing that they really, really like and they're very, very high on. But this Damonic Williams addition, I think, is the big one. It's the defensive tackle addition that they've been really looking to land for several years. And so over the last 6 months since the December early signing period, they added 5-star defensive tackle David Stone. They added 4-star defensive tackle Jaden Jackson. They added Jermaine Lowell. They added Damonic Williams. So they've really just reshaped that defensive tackle group, and they've still got blue chippers behind that, like a Grayson Halton, who continues to ascend and has made splashes all throughout spring and could be that next kind of big time 3-tech for them along the interior.
Is Williams the most impactful transfer Oklahoma has brought in this offseason?
No, Deion Burks is going to be that guy. The Purdue wide receiver. We spoke about him the last time.
Yeah, I like that pick.
He was just incredibly dynamic at the spring game. 6 catches, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns. He has the chance to be a first rounder. Dane Brugler of The Athletic had him in his first round mock draft for the 2025 NFL draft just last week or so. And so I think that's going to be the biggest impact. But Damonic Williams, he's going to have the biggest impact that you may not see on the stat sheet because of what he does on the defensive interior. It's not always going to record a bunch of sacks or TFLs or even tackles, but it's going to open things up and make things a lot easier for everybody else around him. And so those two guys, they're going to be significant. You can't underplay the addition of Branson Hickman either, the SMU center that transferred to Oklahoma. That gives them a dude with like 3,400 snaps to his ledger coming in and taking over at center for what was another experienced guy in Andrew Rame, who is now with the Carolina Panthers. You had to have some experience at center to go into the SEC, especially as Jackson Arnold is taking over as the starting quarterback in this year, having Branson Hickman. What they've done in the portal, they haven't added a bunch of numbers, but the additions that they've made through the transfer portal, are players that are ascending players, and they're going to fill big time needs for this team.
It's impossible to talk about Oklahoma and the transfer portal right now without discussing America's most beloved college football player, quarterback General Booty, who has that real name and is in the portal right now. He'd heard from Iowa, and I think he just, by lieu of his name, like, let's call a spade, people know who he is and might be interested to know where he's going to go. John, where could he end up? What sort of player is he even?
Well, he's also the son of John David Booty, the former USC Trojan quarterback. So he's got.
I remember that. I'm just
connected.
Old enough to remember those days.
Yeah, so he's going to have connections across college football because of who his dad was. But this is a guy that was very productive at Tyler Junior College before coming to Oklahoma, and we didn't get to see him play a whole lot. But he's got some tools. He's a capable runner, and he's got the passing capability. Threw for over 3,100 yards and 25 touchdowns at the JUCO level, and was a really important addition when Brent Venables came on. I mean, when Brent Venables came, they had lost Caleb Williams to the transfer portal, Spencer Rattler to the transfer portal. I want to say prior to that, they had lost Chandler Morris as well. And so the quarterback room completely reshaped. And even though, a guy like General Booty didn't have a ton of profile to him and wasn't maybe the most highly coveted transfer quarterback at the time, it was important because you didn't have a whole lot of depth. You got Dylan Gabriel to come. You got Davis Bevel, who's now at South Carolina, to come. But beyond that, you didn't have great depth at quarterback. Adding a guy like General Booty really helped to kind of help stabilize your depth chart a little bit. So even though we didn't get a chance to see him play, and he was always kind of the biggest mystery. Everybody in Oklahoma Sooner fandom goes back to the 2022 Red River Showdown when Dylan Gabriel was out and Davis Bevel got the start. And this is, no slide against Davis Bevel. He's got some capability, but limited tools wise. And the score is just getting away from Oklahoma, and everybody's wondering, well, why not give General Booty a shot? Some people speculated that he might even get the start that week. It just didn't turn out that way.
What are you going to do? Lose 49-0?
Right. They had nothing to lose.
What could go wrong?
And this is one of the biggest gripes I have, is that Jeff Lebby went into that game with a scared game plan and coached not to lose. And that offense was not good. They tried to run Wildcat with their tight end at quarterback and their running backs. And it was a disaster. And we'll always look back and wonder, what if you would have gone with General Booty? What if you would have done something there? So it's a guy with, that nobody really knows what he could do at the FBS level or at the Power 4 level, but he's got some tools in the toolbox that could be productive for somebody. I mean, he's gotten a look from Iowa, Louisiana Monroe is looking at him, UTSA, Tulsa, which, a lot of people think he'd be a really good fit for Kevin Wilson and his offense there at Tulsa. I think he would be a nice fit with Iowa, a veteran player, somebody who's spent time in a really productive offense, at least learning from Jeff Lebby and Dylan Gabriel, and has some tools that, hey, with an Iowa defense that is among the best in the nation, you don't need a guy like General Booty to go throw for 4,000 yards and 40 combined touchdowns and things like that. No, you just need him to not turn the ball over and make some accurate passes here and there. And I think he's very capable of doing that. Just the limited action that we've seen him in the spring game and some other playing time, I think he's a capable quarterback that, given the right opportunity and an opportunity to play, I think he could surprise a few people.
John Williams, great namesake and a great guest for us here at Locked On College Football. Locked On Sooners, check him out. Thank you, John.
Always a pleasure.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.